So I think the most challenging one is the one that when the war kicked off in 2003, I thought I was going to retire in 2002. I sent a note to a friend of mine, Dave Tomlinson, down at TUMEF. I says, hey, Dave, if you need any help, just let me know. The ball started rolling from there. And so the most challenged position was being the head planner and deputy surgeon for Task Force Tarawa, then was 2nd MEP, going across and then setting up all the Annex Q and everything we need to do. We get on the ground and nothing was like what we planned. Nothing. I mean, it put us, first of all, everything seemed to go, in my eyes, because I was way down the chain, not right. Got dropped off in the middle of nowhere with all of our packs and asking the pilots where do we go, and he just pointed, and we just started walking. But thank God there was a direction, and we went there. But going through and through the breach from Kuwait into Iraq, and nothing seemed to go right. We had bad weather, we had casualties, we had mass casualties, and what do you do when you have hundreds of people and you need to move people? And there's only 3 of you. And I was with the forward command element with General Natonsky, and talk about pressure. And what he said, where is Private so-and-so? And I said, sir, well, according to 24 hours last night, he was here. And he says, no, he's not. He's over here. So this went on for 3 nights, and the last night he says, where's Private so-and-so? I said, sir, well, as of 24 hours last night, he was here. He says, no, he's not. He's on the news, because he's home. So he already had the answers to the questions he asked me. I believe he wanted to know if I knew where his Marine was. That was the toughest job, because communications were a challenge, if there were any. And my job is to find out where all my Marines were and make sure they were accountable. That was the hardest job for me. But I tell you what, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I was a regimental commander. I actually was going to use that same example. Not the medical one.
Never mind.
I was a regimental commander in the Regimental Combat Team 2. And when you lose men in combat, it's the first time since Vietnam, so everybody starts pointing fingers, trying to figure out why it happened, whatever. You know, it's called freaking combat, darn it. You know, it's combat. You're out there fighting, people die. So, the regimental commander, you know your plan's right, and you know you got your act together, you got great commanders, but when the first round was fired, freaking plan ain't the plan. So you can't point fingers. If you know something, you know, tell people what you know. And then you accept full responsibility. You know, I do. And we were involved in Al-Nazariyah. Everybody's running all over the place because the Army was inside our wire. We didn't know. You know, you heard that thing about Jessica running all over. We were the ones in security. So being in a combat zone at the regimental level, in combat, taking casualties, you're 30 miles, you got 1 unit 30 miles over here, and you got 2 units over here, and you got 2 bridges to cover. Probably the most difficult, most challenging that I won't make any comments about where my people, the boss has asked you that question, I wouldn't know. But I think the most important thing is as a leader that you can't be a chameleon, be the same person all the time. Be steady, be firm, and back your people. When they do what you tell them to do, if you don't back, then you're not the person that there was no system in it. So what you see today was developed because of those first few days in combat.
Sure. Gentlemen?
I absolutely have to agree that my first deployment in support of combat operations in 2004 was the most challenging assignment, challenging task I had. Back in 2004, I was assigned as the operations officer for 9th Communication Battalion, and I think during that time when we were in support of OIF-1 or OIF-2, there's a lot going on within the theater. So regardless of who you were with, I think that you had your individual challenges. So for me, that's what I prepared for. I think that's for most of us. That's what we prepared for. All my training, all my education, all my time in professional schools, all the long hours and the work and the training out here in this area was all for that opportunity, all for that time. But then when it became very real, when you're actually now starting to deploy, you got Marines that are waiting for your call, and you're the one responsible for the operations order. You're the one, doing the homework to really assess the enemy situation, determine are your Marines set to perform whatever their job is or whatever their task is in that combat environment. It's no longer academic. So I remember, long nights after doing the study of the AO, study what our mission was going to be, asking myself, am I ready for this? Am I truly prepared? Am I competent? Am I the professional in my job to make sure that the decisions I'm making, the plans we're putting in place, the battalion commanders got confidence in them, and our Marines are going to come back home, or the Marines are going to be able to perform to the best of their ability within this environment, come back home safely if they can. I tell you, from the moment that you deploy on, you're just absolutely sprinting. It's absolutely a go. During that same time frame is when the IDF was just prevalent throughout every one of the major bases there. Our forces were spread throughout the entire AO. My responsibility was not only to ensure that we provide the comm, but to go to each one of those locations. And then we took on additional responsibilities of conducting convoy operations, so actually combat convoy operations within that theater. Communicators, right? No, Marines. Someone in our AO said, hey, there's a Marine platoon with heavy guns and trucks, and they know how to do this, and so you have the responsibility of performing this mission. So again, that constant question is, did we train? Did we do everything correctly? Are our Marines going to be fine when they go outside the wire and they get faced with adversity? For the first time for very many of us. But the greater challenge for me was actually my battalion commander went back to CONUS for a while, and then I became the deck commander while we were out there. And that's when I learned, we'll write this one down here, that's when I learned that those who are not in command have the benefit of scrutiny. Those who are not in command have the benefit of scrutinizing every decision that you make, why you did it or not. Those in command have that burden. So that was a big game changer for me. I was glad when my commander came back in theater. That was actually during Fallujah 2. And when you realize that you have the lives of young men and women, their responsibilities within your hands, and the decisions that you make through the planning or the decision of where you're going to send them, that ultimate responsibility rests within your hands and within your lap. That was a huge challenge for me.
Well, I'm going to have a different sort of story to tell, I guess, when I look back on 26 years of naval service. And every year has been a year of learning, and there have been fascinating tours with great different levels of responsibility, of which I have really enjoyed and benefited. When you ask the question, what was the most challenging, since every year is a year of learning, we have at least one intern that I see in this group. I think my most challenging year of my 26 years was my intern year. Now, this is not a life or death, battlefield sort of story. Although I guess, when you're in medical school, the first 2 years of medical school are largely academic. The next 2 years you do have the lowest level of patient care sort of responsibilities, and it's medical training is a tremendous apprenticeship where you have the third year medical student reports to the fourth year, who reports to the intern, who reports to the second year, reports to the third year, to the chief, to the staff, and it's like you're way down on the totem pole as far as levels of responsibility. But one of the big opportunities for an increased level of responsibility is when you move from graduate medical school and you call a doctor, and you really don't have a lot of clue as to what a doctor really is, and then you learn how to be a doctor during your intern year. And so the learning curve is probably the steepest in the medical arena. It's always my most challenging year in relation to the steepness of the learning curve, but then you add onto that the physical challenges that were more prevalent then, frankly, than they are now. Those were the days of, thankfully medicine's gotten a lot smarter. and, you know, a lot safer for our patients, but those were the days of, you know, pretty significant fatigue. We were on call every third night, and we were up most of every third night. And you didn't go home, you know, when you were off call, so you were up all day, you were up all night. Many times you never putting your head down on the pillow, and then you worked all the next day. And then, you know, there were times when I was in the clinic in the afternoon of that day, and I was in front of patients, and I would fall asleep in front of a patient. That's not very good care. When you're interviewing a patient, you fall asleep. You know, and so you go home that night, and you were absolutely exhausted. I had 2 kids at that point in time, and I read them bedtime stories, and I'd be falling asleep. And so that night was shot. And, you know, then the next night the next day you'd go and work your entire day, and then you'd come home that night, and, you know, okay, you were still pretty tired, but you got to, you know, at least a fairly decent night's sleep that night. But then the next day, it started all over again. You were up all day, up all night, and, you know, you didn't go home till, you know, 6 o'clock at night the next day. And for most of that year, it was every third night that sort of regimen. It sort of shifted after January to a third and fourth night. So from a physically challenging standpoint, it was a challenging year. It was a challenging year of increased responsibility as well. Yes, certainly there began to have a responsibility as our warfighting colleagues talked about the responsibility of life at your hands, and you have beginning to have a responsibility of life in your hands as a physician. You know, during that year, you start to feel that level of responsibility, and that's challenging. So a little bit of a non-warfighting story.
All right. Another question? Ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Commander Ellis Hicks now. OR nurse extraordinaire. My question is for anyone on the panel. I just recently returned from Kandahar, Afghanistan, and my question is, you didn't ask me what my philosophy is as a sailor, but my philosophy is if I'm sent somewhere on a mission, then that is what I'm there to do. What I found that because of how long we've been in Afghanistan, it appears that the mission is kind of fuzzy. I was at the Roll 3 hospital, and life, limb, and eyesight. Life, limb, and eyesight. But it seemed like we've been there so long that we're finding other things to focus on other than life, limb, and eyesight. My question is on when as commanding officers and you find that maybe the mission you were sent there to do turns into something else, how do you help the sailors to understand that, okay, we may be here to do this, but because of the situation, we must do this now? Did I kind of?
Okay. Who'd like to tackle that one?
I think it's a medical question, but. When you start talking, I call it mission creep. You know, the mission creeps to something else, or transitions into something else, or you're kind of caught in between. And I think right now in Afghanistan, we're kind of caught in between because we were in this decisive phase, and as we started preparing the Afghan takeover role, and now we're going into the advisor phase. So, in my opinion, I think the most important thing you can do is communicate. You've got to be able to communicate what is transpiring, what is changing, what is taking place, so that everybody can see it, and not allow it to happen through osmosis. You know, when you're just there and you see things changing, but nobody's saying it, and you're kind of at a loss as to why. That's what we're very good at this in the military, and evidently we're not doing what we should do, and that's ensuring that the mission's clear. I mean, our mission should be clear and concise, and if the mission's not clear and concise, then it's the commander's job, it's the leader's job to make sure it's clear and concise. So my advice would be that as commanders, you've got to make sure everybody understands what your intent is, and that everybody understands the mission. General Gray was former commandant. He was very good. He's the guy that created this thing called commander's intent. You know, what he used to do is he would go to the PFC and ask asked the PFC, what's the commander's intent? And if the PFC didn't understand the commander's intent, he was on the boss. He's up there saying, you're not making it clear so everybody understands. Basically, his philosophy was that if in fact the leadership wasn't there, the last person in the unit would know, I need to build across that bridge. That's the end state. The end state is that I need to have 5 tanks on this side of the bridge and hold it for this or that. So I think that our job as leaders is, one, communicate the mission clearly and make sure that everyone understands it. And then also, you gotta make sure everybody's vectored and focused in that way so they're not working against each other. And when you don't do that, it creates doubt. And when you have doubt, then people don't trust. And when people don't trust, you've almost lost it.
So I'll pile on top of that, those wise comments. There's a book I'd recommend that you read, and it's called The 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive. It's by an author named Patrick Lencioni. And General Bailey's exactly right. It has to do with having a clear message. And the first obsession in that book is to pick the appropriate team. But then I'm going to focus on the next 2 through 4. So the next obsession is to create organizational clarity. And so that's really to make sure that you clearly know which direction you're going to go. What's your mission, vision, goals, and objective? And then the third point is over-communicate that organizational clarity. Then the fourth one is build human systems around that organizational clarity. So you can see of his 4 obsessions, all 3 deal with that focus of mission and the communication of that. You know, we at Naval Hospital, Camp Pendleton here, we are focusing on what we have termed a wildly important goal, trying to narrow our battle space into what's important to us at Naval Hospital, Camp Pendleton. That deals with trying to accomplish our vision, being the preferred choice in patient and family-centered care. It's all around building that loyalty. And you know, as the illustration that the general saw, an illustration that I like to give as well is an organization ought to have that kind of organizational clarity. Everybody knows what you're trying to accomplish. And I like the illustration in the 1960s when they went to a custodial engineer at NASA. He was sweeping the floor in the basement of you know, some room in Houston, and somebody said to him, "Sir, what are you doing?" And as he was sweeping, pushing that broom, he said, "I'm putting a man on the moon." So he understood that what he did contributed to the overall mission of what NASA was, put a man on the moon. And so I think, you know, it's the job of a leader to make sure that everybody can articulate, you know, what the organizational clarity is, what the mission is. And if they're drifting off and it's morphing into something else, then it's the job of a leader to try to redirect and refocus so that people understand what it is.
Another question from the floor. Captain Page. You got your question? You got your question?
I definitely have a question.
Absolutely.
I actually got a couple questions.
Okay, just one,
You
please.
already got one.
Okay.
Captain Page, First Marine Division Comp Company. I'm an LDO. I was just gonna ask to the Marines on the panel, from your perspective, as the dynamics change, and we obviously, I guess manpower gets adjusted due to operational tempos, what do you see as far as the employment of restricted officers and filling in unrestricted officer billets?
Just to summarize those who couldn't hear him, his question was regarding LDOs and restricted officers, specific to the Marine Corps, but I'm sure the Navy can address also where we see the future with the personnel constraints that are posed with our services.
As a communicator, the restricted officer community is absolutely integral for us. And so I've often talked to, from those that are LDOs as well as our warrant officers, how absolutely critical they are to the communications MOS, communications field. It's very technical MOS now, and as we know, as Marine officers, we expect Marine officers to be generalists. We expect them to be good across the board and doing several different things. In fact, a part of our career path is that you're going to do something within your MOS, demonstrate MOS credibility, and then for career diversity and expose you to another element or aspect of the Marine Corps, you're probably going to go on a B-billet somewhere outside of your MOS, hopefully get some professional education, and then return back to the fleet and jump back in there. Particularly in MOSs where the technology, where the industry continues to move on and grows on, those restricted officer community is absolutely necessary. So first of all, those officers are key. Secondly, once those officers, again, I hate to speak specifically to communicators, but I'm sure in the very other technical MOSs this still applies. When you get that tasker to send an 0602, an 0402, a regular officer, an unrestricted officer, you get the tasker to send them to an IA billet. When that workforce starts to get depleted, not only are the restricted officers going to be the ones to cover down and hold down how the commands continue to function, but they're now getting experience in working outside of their MOS. And they're now being asked to fill regular officer billets, in command, as battalion XOs, as operations officers. They're developing that credibility, they're developing that proficiency as well. So, kind of answering your question a little differently, I'm going to add part one of that is I think that they're necessary to continue on to keep the success of our especially in our technical communities, of keeping us going in one particular direction. But in that experience and billets outside of their MOS, they're also demonstrating that they're qualified to fill special assignments outside, for those SFAT taskers, those IA taskers as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Let me give you the Marine Corps answer also. As you know, you're promoted by a number. There's only 15 allocated for so many different restricted officer billets as someone gets out and retired and you can keep promoting up. When we get in a situation that we're going into, in the Corps and the Navy and all the services have been in a situation where physical constraints will dictate what happens to us. We're in war now. Because we're in war now, it's an excellent opportunity to restrict MOS to work in different MOSs. But when we come out of war, all those regular officers are now going to be filling those billets. So now you become that specialist and you will be assigned to your specialist field. And you won't have that same latitude that we've had over the last 10 years because you could very well be filling an unrestricted billet because the unrestricted officer is gone, and so you have the opportunity to elevate. As things tighten down, you're going to be restricted to your field. And promotions will get restricted to who retires, one slot up, one slot to move up. So everything becomes competitive. And that's the reality of our life and the world that we live in terms of when a nation's economy is not right, it's not going to have the country will not maintain a large military. And so I've seen it before, and you're seeing it now. And as you move up and be sitting up here, you'll be saying the same thing to someone else as this nation will go up and down in terms of the money that's allocated to maintain the military. As we come out of the war, regular officers go into regular assignments, restricted officers are going to go into restricted officer roles.
Okay. Yes, sir, right back in there.
Commander Bill McCarty, I'm the Chief Medical Officer here at the Hospital Campaign.
Absolutely.
My question is for the panel. Sirs, what are you doing to actively engage mentor young and upcoming leaders? And what do you recommend? How do you do that? And then vice versa, what could you give to the officers in this audience, tips on how to seek out mentorship from seniors?
Great question. Gentlemen, I'll give you a second to think about it. Sir, I know you don't need to think about it.
Let me tell you what I do. I make myself available. I give her my telephone number. I go to different events. I introduce myself. I shake hands. And I ask, who are you, where are you, and what you're doing? And I think that's the most important thing we can do as senior officers is that we mentor and we teach. And then we make them aware of those below us. What's out there? Okay, what is that next assignment? It doesn't matter. Now I'm going to say the following. I remember when an aviator came up to me and said, "Sir, I want you to be my mentor." I said, "You know I'm a mentor." "Sir, I don't care. I want you to be my mentor." And some of you probably heard this story. He was the aviator of the year, backseater. And he goes off and he said, "I want to apply and become a pilot." And when I came out of school, I don't know why I got vectored in, and he was a backseater. And he applied, and he's in flight school, and he's doing very well. He selects jets. Lo and behold, he can't land on the carrier. So he calls me and says, "Sir, I've done this. I want to switch over to C-130s." I said, "Switch over to C-130s? Midstream?" I said, "Yes, sir, I can do it. I know I can. There's no requirement for a C-130 to land on an aircraft carrier." I said, "Yeah, in the seat because he and I were council fellow, we were at the council fellow relationship. So I knew him and I called him, and then I called another friend and said, hey, this guy's completed, he's done a good job. And lo and behold, we were able to switch. I tell you that story to say it doesn't matter what field you're in, that you find someone that you connect with, and then you mentor them. Yes, if you're a doctor and you've got another doctor to send you to, that probably helps. But I would say that you've got to make yourself available, and in making yourself available, then you become the mentor for many. And I don't think you should limit yourself. Just be out there, because I remind people of the Father. When you're mentoring someone, you're making not only that service, that individual better, but you're making the nation better. Don't look at the near term, look at the broad perspective. If you have just made a difference in the life of that individual who will make the nation better, not just that individual.
If I might add it, I would like to add to this because I personally have a passion for mentoring. Personally, I think I shared with y'all earlier about my perspective. It's a whole paradigm shift. Wherever we go, wherever we've been placed, I truly do believe I'm sent there to learn from someone. You're there to learn, to be a better professional, technician, husband, father. You know, there's someone there you're supposed to be able to learn from. Having a teachable spirit means I'm going in seeking someone who's successful, seeking someone who's doing right now or has done before what I'm trying to accomplish. That works both ways also. When I'm in that new environment, I'm going there, I'm seeking who it is that I'm supposed to be helping out. Whatever environment we're in, there's someone we're supposed to be learning from, and there's someone we're supposed to be teaching and training. I acknowledge that where I am today is not on my own at all, but it's because of men and women who've taken the time to invest in me, who've asked me where I'm going to go next. What are you thinking about doing? You know, hey, how's it looking right now? How's your family doing? Because of those who took the time to reach down or reach back or look back and ask me how I'm doing, and then they became that encouragement, they became that motivation for me to continue to move forward and get where I am. When you get to that spot, regardless of where you are, whether you're a JG or first lieutenant, you know, or the senior officer here, you know, when you finally get to that spot, you know, turn back around and realize that you came from somewhere and probably didn't get there on your own. So who was it that encouraged you, that motivated you, that maybe even assisted you? That's that part of that mentoring relationship. But then also realize, for me, it becomes then a personal obligation to ensure that next generation, that next group, that as I call it, especially when I had an opportunity to go back to Naval Academy, that we are responsible for training and maturing and developing the next generation of Naval Service officer. You could look at it as just an assignment, and I'm just here for 2 years or 3 years, or you can look at it about your sphere of influence. Who are you learning from and growing from? And are you keeping a regular relationship with them so you can continue to be better, be smarter, be wiser? And then who are you teaching? Who are you mentoring? Who are you coaching along the way to help them get there as well?
Ronald.L.Bailey@usnc.mil. Okay? That's for everybody. Try me. I keep telling you. Try me.
It's interesting, you know, looking at this. I always make a point of wherever I've been, as long as I've been a commission, I always have my business card. And ask General Bailey, I kind of slipped it to him here the other night, because I believe you remember people, and I write on the back of it who I go through and I talk to, the date, and a little bit about that conversation, because you never know the conversation and what it can lead to in talking with somebody else. I also look at never close your door. Always give an honest answer. Always be available. Remember, when you're reaching up with one hand and looking for assistance, you got that other hand. You need to bring somebody with you. And always shake a hand. And if you come to my office, I'll always bring you in. I'll ask what?
Do you want a water?
Do you want a water?
Right.
So I always provide something. I always start a conversation. I always want to look at, because the people who are, you know, for me, I don't matter. Who matters is all of you. And so I take an active, and when I look at somebody who's heading out the door, whether they're being ADCEP or whether they're just getting out and moving on. And I always talk to the staff, I says, make sure that last week, that last day, is to have a good impression of what's going on, because they will be either a good recruiter for you or a bad recruiter. Somebody at the lasting impression, either a good or bad. So what is that last impression that they'll think?